Yeah, is this fine? Yeah. Yeah, so I talk. I've heard that Indian accent is hard to understand in Hong Kong. So if you don't understand, just like let me know. I'll also try talking more slowly so that you can follow along. So my name is Devansh, and I joined the EF around 2 months ago. I'll start with a story about how I got the job at EF. I was tweeting every day, and in last year in Berlin, Vitalik followed my account after I tweeted about an event that he attended, and I said this is the main takeaways from the event, and he liked it and he followed me. And after that, he kept engaging with my tweets and other things. And I wrote a tweet saying that I want to use AI to quantify impact. And after that, he got in touch saying, hey, I've been thinking about how to also work on this. How can we use LLMs to measure the impact of some work? And he then laid out a mechanism called deep funding, which is what I then got hired at the EF to work on. So the lesson is try to tweet every day and be active over there, and not just heads down building, but also writing and getting influence in the ecosystem through that. How do I change the next button? Oh, space. Got it. Yeah. So maybe it helps with understanding how deep funding is different from protocol guild. How many of you have heard of protocol guild? 1 and 2. Okay, so not many. So this is an example of protocol guild over here, where it's a list of 190 of the core Ethereum developers. So if you're working on consensus clients, execution clients, you get added to the protocol guild list, and all the layer 2 ecosystems give some airdrops to protocol guild. So the famous thing is called the protocol guild pledge, where you say that 1% of my tokens will go towards the Ethereum core developers, whoever's actually working on the protocol. So they have a very simple model where you if you're launching your own token, you put 1% into the guild, and then the guild gives it to contributors based on how long they've been contributing. So if I've been working for 5 years, I have a very high weight and I'll get a lot of the money. But if I've been working for 6 months, I'll get less money from the guild. So it's 190 people. On average, they get $70,000 every year from protocol guild. So that's kind of the it's the newest experiment on the block. So how is deep funding different from that? So this is where deep funding is, where people can give money into an algorithm or a splits contract, and that gives it to the repos. So the biggest difference is protocol guild gives it to the developers like a basic income. Like if you're working on Ethereum, you will get enough money that your needs are taken care of. But in deep funding, we give it to the repos. So the repo like Nethermind or Get, they can take that money and hire new people. So protocol guild gives the money to individuals who are already working. Deep funding gives it to organizations who can then hire new people if they want. Protocol guild also gives it on the basis of time, which I'm not a big fan of. All of us know the meme of the 10x developer who in 3 months does more work than someone does in 10 years. So protocol guild doesn't have that. If you're working for a long time, you get more money. So that's the second difference, that we try to measure how important your contributions are. So this is kind of some of the big issues. How many of you have applied for a grant before in this room? 1, 2, 3. Okay, only 3 people. So not a lot of people who are applying for grants. And I think the biggest problem with that, and the reason many of you probably haven't applied, is what I call the only crying babies get fed. So only if you cry very loudly and you actually apply for the grants, or you tell people to support your project, only then do you actually get money. And a lot of us don't want to do that. I took part in a Gitcoin round, and I did not like telling all my friends, hey, please give me $1, please vote for me. I didn't like that feeling very much. So that's the problem called only crying babies get fed. How many of you have been a juror? How many of you have to give away money? Sit on a committee to give away money. That's one. Two. Okay, so two people have sat on committees before. So something which you realize is that it's not fun to go through 500 projects. There are like so many projects that are sent to you, and you have to look at each project and make a decision. So something which Vitalik said, this is a funny joke. Vitalik said that people at ETH Global told him not to be a judge anymore. They told him, Vitalik, you're a very bad judge. We don't want you to be a judge. And the reason is because he has to go through 30 projects, and that's just too much for him. He's saying, if I have to just do 3 projects, I can do a good job. But 30 projects, and I just like zone out and I just start giving random numbers after that. So that's the second problem, that it's all about quantity over quality. Go through 500 projects, and it's not like go through 3 projects, but have a good, well thought out reason for it. So those are the problems that deep funding is trying to solve. So now we come to the main part of it, and this is like the call to action. How many of you have worked and can use AI well? Like rough show of hands, how many of you AI, machine learning, all of that? Like 2 people. Okay, so not a lot, but kind of what we're looking at is we have 15,000 edges in the Ethereum graph. So if we look at what makes Ethereum work, it's consensus client, execution client, and chef tooling. So chef tooling is things like Solidity, execution client is Prism, and consensus client is something like Get, like broadly. Might have mixed some of that up, but like those are the categories. So if we look at those 3 and all of their dependencies, we have about 15,000 edges and 5,000 open source repos that make up Ethereum. Obviously, not all 5,000 repos are equal. Some are more equal than others. So we are hosting a machine learning competition for people to build an AI model which predicts how important a repo is. So we might say this repo is worth 20%, this repo is worth 10%, this is 5%. So we open it up to the community to submit their own prediction of how important a repo is. And so this is kind of how it works, that there are 34 seed nodes. So you have to A plus B plus C plus D should equal to 1. Figure out how important the repo is or its dependencies. So that's level 2. And level 3 is all the dependencies of a repo add up to 1. So if we look at Brave browser, how many of you have used Brave browser before? Brave is 2 people and 3 people have used Brave. So Brave is actually a fork of an open source repo called Chromium. So Chromium is like the main repo, and Brave is like a wrapping on top of Chromium. So you don't want to give all the money to Brave. You want to give more money to Chromium because Chromium has done the hard work. So that's kind of the part of level 2, that how much is the repo itself and how much is the dependency of the repo. So this maybe shows it much easier. This is the graph. There are 10,000 edges over here, 10,000 links, and all of the important repos are listed over here. So basically in one line, if there's one takeaway that I want you to go away with from this talk, it's that we are having a competition where the community has to submit models which say how thick these lines should be. So this is called an unweighted dependency graph. So this is a dependency graph, but there's no weights given. Every line is equal. So the competition which we are hosting, where we want participation and $50,000 in prizes from Vitalik, is that tell us how thick these lines are. How much weight does each repo have? So let's assume that everybody here in this room like submits their own model. So everyone here submits their own model for how thick these lines should be. And so now how do we decide who is the winner? How do we decide who gets the $50,000 from Vitalik for submitting the most accurate model? So this is the jury mechanism. So this is how we decide the winners. There are we have about 80 judges who do comparisons like this. Which dependency gets more credit for Treiku's success? Is it Pavel or is it Eslin? And they might say that Eslin deserves 256 more credit than Pavel, and they give a reason over here. So the judge only gives like 5 of these comparisons or 30 of these comparisons. Very few, but very well thought out. Because we want the judge to give well thought out comparison and not just a lot of comparisons. They can't do all 15,000, but they can do maybe 500 or 1,000 totally. Each judge only does like 30 of them. So we use their comparisons and their judgment to select which AI model is the most aligned with their thinking. And that AI model then gets to give money to all of the Ethereum repos. So this is like an example of what the end output of deep funding might look like. This competition will be on until June 10th. So if any of you want to try this out and get your hands dirty with machine learning, this is like a great challenge to get involved with, where this is just based on GitHub stars. So do not take any of these numbers seriously. But kind of the way to interpret this is, if I put money into one public key, it gets distributed by 15.3% into Remix, 13.7% into Go Ethereum. So because the prompt which Vitalik gave was, I want to have just one public key, I give money to that public key, and it gets distributed to all of the important repos in Ethereum. He does not want to get into the debate of who deserves more money, am I giving too much? He does not want to get involved in that. He just wants to give money into one public key and it gets distributed to all of the repos in Ethereum. So that's kind of the end output of what a model submission would look like. Give weights and we see which submissions correspond to the jury mechanism there. This is like a really cool graph. I'm reaching the end of this presentation, but this is a graph that Vitalik made to show how deep funding would look if we looked at ideological ideas of Ethereum, ideological kind of things. So on the first level over here, you have Ethereum. On the first level, you have its influences like the open source software movement, which is 20.5% responsible for Ethereum. You have Bitcoin's monetary policy, 19.5%. And then you decide how much is Bitcoin's contribution original versus its dependencies. So here Vitalik has said that Bitcoin is 1/3 original and 2/3 it belongs to the dependencies like the Austrian economics, Marx's labor theory of value. All of these have helped Bitcoin grow. So kind of, if I have to give an example, if I put $100 into this graph, $20 goes to Bitcoin's monetary policy, but only 1/3 of that stays with Bitcoin. So around $7 stays with Bitcoin, and the rest goes to its dependencies, the rest $13. And the rest $13 get distributed to those dependencies with the weight shown over there. So Austrian economics gets about $4 out of that because it's 1/3 responsible, and Marx gets about 25 cents. So if I put $100 into this graph, 25 cents to Marx, $4 to Austrian economics, and $7 to Bitcoin's monetary policy. So that's how you interpret this. We are obviously not using this for funding, but this is like an indication of how we can fund open source repos with this. Yeah, before I go on to that, I'll just talk about why we want this, which is companies have always outcompeted open source networks because they integrate the profit center and the cost center. So how many of you know what profit centers and cost centers are? One, okay, not many. So I'll give you a simple example. Like if you look at Twitter, they have an ad division which earns revenue. So any company department which makes money is called a profit center because they're earning profit for the company. Something like community notes. Community notes tells us whether the tweet is true or false, but it does not generate revenue for the company directly. So that's called a cost center. So in a company, the profit center gives money to the cost center without any control over them. It's not like the ad division can say, I don't want to give money to community nodes. There's a central department, the CEO and the CFO, who gets to decide how much money goes to which department. Whereas in open source networks, we don't have that. If there is a profit center, it gets to decide how much money goes to the cost center. So things like Solidarity is a cost center. Things like Aave are profit centers. But there's no way for Aave to support its cost centers, which is why companies have historically always outcompeted open source networks. So the hope with these dependency graphs is that we can actually better integrate profit center and cost center in open source networks. This is another challenge that we just finished, where you have to build an AI model to predict how much money each project will get in a Gitcoin round. So the Gitcoin round has not begun. People submit AI models saying this project is going to get $100, this project is going to get $500. And then when the round starts, we stop submissions and we see which AI model best predicted the results of the round. And that's really cool because even if a project does not take part in Gitcoin, we can still guess how much money should go to that project, which is what the top AI model which predicted the results. What is the top AI model saying about how much that project should get? So this is another challenge that we just completed. This is the deep funding challenge, where you have to tell us, this is the past funding challenge. So we just finished this challenge. We got 21 high quality models submitted, which looked at things like the winning model found that number of open issues is a good predictor of how much funding a project gets. So they actually submitted models and they told us, if you go to this link over here, you can actually see what type of AI models were submitted in this challenge. And this is the deep funding challenge, which is going to be open till June 10th. We really want good quality submissions. That's what the challenge depends on, getting good participation from AI people and people who want to get their hands dirty with AI to actually make submissions. So that's open now. And this is the team that's made it all possible. Kind of something which is cool is that we work with people who have been thinking about these issues for years. So Open Source Observer has been working on GitHub repos and how do we represent them. So we use them to generate the graph. Pairwise has been working on the voting interface. So we use them for the jury. Drips is working on how do we get money to open source repos. So we use them for distribution. Pond is the platform for machine learning competitions. So we use them to host it. And Allo Capital has built a lot of different funding mechanisms. So to increase the speed of experiments, we just have to combine the existing projects into something which is new. So rather than building everything from scratch at the EF, we just work with partners and combine whatever they've built into deep funding. And yeah, this is the last graph. If you find any of these ideas cool, scan this QR code and join our Telegram group. Thanks. Yeah. Was it understandable, my accent? Or yeah,
it's pretty understandable. So talking about kind of you are in charge of AI, public goods, governance, mainly on EF. So as I mentioned earlier, I think Gitcoin public goods, or say Gitcoin protocol, is actually having such a high operational cost. So I understood that Gitcoin is doing new experiments and also we are seeing better outcomes. But do you think the operational cost is going to drop drastically over maybe next 6 months or maybe next round?
So I think one thing which I do like about Gitcoin is that they've separated their matching fund budget from their operational cost budget. So their matching fund currently is about $10 million. It used to be 15 million. It's gone down because they kept it in ETH, which was actually quite smart. If you look at early projects like Bancor actually converted their ETH into dollars, but something like Golem at the same time did not convert it and it went up. So Gitcoin, it's not like a given that Gitcoin would have held on to all the ETH and it's gone up in value massively. So they have a huge matching fund of $10 million. which they cannot use for operational costs. That can only be used for mulching. And the operational costs basically come from like VC firms. There are VCs who invested in Bitcoin, and they use that for their operational budget. So I think the bigger issue is not the cost. The bigger issue is that they've not experimented as much as they maybe could have in their rounds. And they're not using that money as effectively as they could. That's what I feel is the bigger issue compared to reducing costs.
And moving on next, I think Gitcoin, or say the Infinite Garden, is supposed to like sponsor or say grant public goods. So everybody has their own definition for public goods. Actually, I think public goods are different from only like open source software, because open source software is actually one of the sector of Bitcoin round. It's not just like public goods doesn't mean open source. So like, could you give us a precise definition, maybe your own version of what actually public goods is considered?
Yeah, I actually have a very mathematical definition of it, which is public goods is equal to value creation minus value capture. So if you as a project have created a lot of value, like say Facebook has created value in the world, but they've also captured all that value. They've managed to get enough revenue to actually be equal to the value they've created. So they are not a public good. But something like Linux has created a lot of value for the world, but they have not captured the value which they've created. So Linux is a public good. So public goods funding should try to bridge the gap between value creation and value capture.
Okay, so that actually reminds me of the revenue evilness right? That Scott always mentioned. So I guess as a following up question, I think like right now, not only Gitcoin, not only ETH, but also like the OP Grants House or other foundations are waiting or say trying to value influence as much as or say impact. And also as this is a research house, I know it's a hacker house, so I strongly recommend the fellows to use paradigm tech stacks. So maybe not RDs, okay, don't go that, but like BIM, Boundary, Truffle, and Wacme Wallet Kit. Like those are super good tech stacks. But also like maybe they are open source softwares and they are not taking like revenue or like taking value back from those open source softwares. But what they actually are monetizing is their impact and also influence. Like they are amplifying what they actually did. And sometimes I think they exaggerate what they have done. Like they're claiming something they have like other dependencies as you mentioned. So how do you think that thing can be changed, or say, how do you think Ethereum Foundation or everybody can help a lot on that?
Yeah, so I think I call this problem the halo effect, where they are supposed to have like a good reputation, and because of that, people support them in Gitcoin rounds, like people give them grants, and because they have this like reputation, and you don't actually dig into the details. So I'll give you one story from the funding, which is a lot of the judges gave good marks to Web3.js. So Web3.js is like a version of Beam, but and it's very old, but no one uses Web3.js anymore. So deep funding was going on. All the judges were giving good marks to Web3.js, but the EF was doing its own investigation, and the Ethereum Foundation found that no one is using Web3.js anymore. So because of that, they discontinued the repo. They even wrote a tweet, Web3.js, that we are retiring. And I'm looking at the spreadsheet results of the judges, and I'm seeing like Web3.js is so useful, it's had the ecosystem. And then I'm looking at the report from the EF, which is saying no one is using Web3.js anymore. So I'm like, how do I combine both of these? So that's the halo effect in action, right? That like it has a good reputation, so people are giving it good marks without actually digging into how many people are still using it. So that's kind of the big issue that is not solved yet. Yeah.
And yeah, so moving on next, like the also like the following up question is like how do you see that a public good actually gets the impact? Because I like for my personally, I go through like Bankless DAO and Nouns DAO and all of like Chinese DAOs as well. So one of the main issues is that like this is like a funny joke I made on my personal Twitter account is that you realize that we have the second foundation and organization, and I just made a joke on Twitter is that okay, I'm gonna just start write a Chinese newsletter for every single week, like weekly newsletter, and I'm gonna get granted. So I made it ironically because like over the years we've been evaluating like education, newsletter stuff like that. But like very recently we lost the ETH weekly, and that actually hurts me pretty much. So how do you think like on that in general?
Yeah, it's like the EF is sometimes a like very delicate position where we don't want to be seen as kingmakers, that we are choosing this project and then all the competitors of that project is like, oh, EF has chosen this project, what do we do now? So that's why historically the EF has funded a lot of events, which has actually led to too many events in Web3. Like, you know, because that's like the easy way to get funding from the EF historically. And I see a lot of that changing now. Like now the EF is being more opinionated because we are in a different regulatory environment. EF played it very smart, and we got the EPF and we got a lot of other things which wouldn't have happened had we been more opinionated. So I mean, specifically on the thing of like weekly news, I mean, there's a like it's kind of like complicated one because EF had reached out to them, they didn't respond. So like it's a lot of murky stuff, and I haven't dug fully into it. But it's like hard because it's like in 2017, it was a very different grants environment. Like whoever was applying for grants was usually of a decent caliber. But after 2017, it brought in a lot of people into the ecosystem. And now kind of it's become a very adversarial game where like people want to try getting as much as they can from the institution. The institution has to be very diligent and careful about who they give grants to. So in general, I think the grants environment has just become a lot more adversarial. And I'm hopeful that like things like AI kind of prevent the need for even applying for a grant. So you're contributing to the relevant GitHub repos, and we are able to identify that and just give you money directly without you even applying. So hopefully it can become less adversarial through that.
And I think this might be my last question, and I'll go forward to the stage. So also like yesterday, talking to the colleagues, like he values privacy as a like very super public good, and like most of the people here works in photography and ZK, they are in ZK. So if privacy is an issue, and we all value them at the most. And how do you see the like regulation, as you mentioned, for the climate change a little bit? Because actually I was into gaming before, and I joined this company. And immediately after tornado crashes mean to be innocent. This is the exact moment I joined my company. And and also I know the story behind auctioning and also Umbra. That's such enough auctioning stuff going on. But how do we kind of like report or call to action for people to value privacy once again, since the regulation climate kind of like have been ended?
Yeah, I think like privacy has always suffered from like a mass market problem where the average consumer does not care about privacy. That's like the bad news. But the good news is that all the top people care about privacy. So people at the top levels of society care deeply about privacy because they are under more scrutiny, but the average person does not care about privacy. So you kind of have this weird thing where people, like your tools will not get mass market adoption. Like Signal has much less adoption than WhatsApp, but Signal is used by Donald Trump and all his ministers. So like the top people are all using it, right? So I think privacy should generally kind of command a premium. Like if you have a privacy-based product, like charge high margins for it because
this is yes, the famous having the assumption for right. So private detail also transparent laws. Okay, so yeah, that quote I cannot I remember the exact words, but he said it yesterday, but still forget about it. So basically, it's like let the bigger ones have the transparency, and the weaker ones have the privacy. So 就是强者有透明度，然后让强者变得透明，让弱者有隐私。But this is actually kind of against what you just mentioned, and what I think is a PMF, like charging a high margin, say a premium on to the top level person who cares about privacy. So is that any better ways for us to like work around it?
Yeah, I think it's like depends on how pragmatic you want to be. Like the pragmatic rule, like if you look at something like Railgun is like a great privacy protocol, but it's also very expensive. And that's how you start off, at least. Like when you're just launching, like you are going to be expensive, and you cater to those who care about privacy, who basically have money. People who have money care about privacy. Those who don't have money don't care about privacy. So simplification, but that's how it.
So maybe we can have a like subsidy model for. Okay, I think we are open to the stage right now. Okay.
Yeah, so I talked about like the halo effect. I talk about one other issue in giving money, which is actually very like difficult to solve. It's what I call like the paths out value. So it basically is like if you have a car that you want to sell, you get more money if you sell the car with each of the parts. So I take out the engine, I sell the engine. I take out the tires, I take out and I sell those. That gets you more money than if you sold the entire car, which doesn't make sense, right? Like technically you should get like the same amount of money. And we see the same phenomena in public good projects and funding, where if something like Protocol Guild applies for money, it gets less money. But if like Protocol Guild divides into 30 different projects, each of which applies, they actually get more money.
So bank does that, right? Yeah. So bank is that whatever. Okay, so like bank is that whatever. And the sigma of bank plus I actually equals more than bank plus itself.
Yeah. So that's kind of because all of the distributions are peanut butter spread. I think it's like this very like kind of egalitarian element that, oh yeah, we should be funding all projects and all. Whereas kind of the market doesn't work that way. The market believes in power law distribution, that like 5% of your projects are going to deliver 80% of your value. So I think we need to move away from this thinking of like being equal and including all, and just like identifying your winners and just like putting a lot of money behind them, which is very opposed to whatever the ethos is.
Any more questions?
So, like, I'm wondering what happens when there is a difference between how much impact a project has and how much money the project needs. Because it could be a very, very small project worked by one person. It's like used by everyone. It's super impactful, but it doesn't really need that much money to get for it. And in such cases, like, how do you allocate the resources?
Yeah, that's a great question, and maybe we can actually make it a real example, which is Beam. Beam basically was started by a Canadian developer who single-handedly overtook Web3.js, but it's like literally one or two guys who are making Beam, so they don't actually require a lot of money. So the instructions we gave the jury was specificity, like is this repo specific to Ethereum or is it used by everyone? Second is additionality. How well can they use the money which we give them? And the third is replaceability, which is if this repo did not exist, how difficult would your life have been? So specificity, additionality, and replaceability is like the larger framework. And something which Vitalik said is that if you make something which half of Ethereum depends on, you deserve $5 million. It doesn't matter whether you spent only $50,000 or $100,000 to make it. So I guess that's where I would come from, that if you are like, we should move away from cost plus pricing. So that's like the biggest issue with all contracts in the government. So like Boeing and others would say that, okay, to get someone to the moon, this is our cost and this is our profit on top of that. And then what they end up doing is they end up increasing their costs, and the cost of that is borne by the taxpayers, or is borne by us. Whereas Elon Musk basically changed the cost plus pricing to be like, this is like the flat rate, and we are going to try making it as cheap as possible so that our margins improve, which was a better system. So I think we need to move away from cost plus pricing and try to just look at, and I actually fell into the same trap. I'm like, there's like, they don't need much money and like it's not being used well. And then Vitalik kind of corrected my thinking here by saying that, look, if half of Ethereum depends on it, it's okay to give them $5 million. And we shouldn't try looking at the cost as a variable at all.
Yeah, something I would add here is that you give them good person score if they're kind of helping. Yeah. And also I think in a traditional business, there's something called goodwill, that is like your reputation. And for giving like maybe that 5 million, actually encourage the atmosphere of our space as the infinite garden. So yes. Any other question? Okay, cool.
So just like talking about like the infinite garden, like something I've advocated for like internally. So we've always followed the principle of subtraction, that by not involving ourselves, like to give an example, ENS, we made the decision at the EF to not make naming an internal part of the protocol. And we actually let ENS do that. And because of that, we now have a strong pillar. Like ENS has as much money as the EF, which is like amazing, right? And they have like revenue coming in, and it's like great that they have that. So subtraction has helped a lot over there. But subtraction was useful when the infinite garden did not have plants. So if we were doing everything, there's no space for any tree to grow. But I think at the juncture we are in now, the infinite garden has a lot of saplings. They have a lot of baby plants, and we need to somehow make sure that all of these plants work together so that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So in philosophy, we call this synthesis. Synthesis is the whole greater than the sum of the parts. An example is a car, where the wheel, the engine, the steering wheel, all of that is not very useful individually, but when you put them together, the car gets locomotion and it moves. So the role of the EF, like what I've been saying in the infinite garden, the role of the EF is to make sure that the whole, all of the different elements in the garden are greater than each of the individual elements. That's kind of what I've advocated for, at least.
We already on time, right? Okay, thanks so much.